Welcome everybody to lunch with EFI. I think we missed last week, didn't we? I wasn't around, and I don't think anyone else jumped on. But we're here today, and we've got 3 new topics separated out into dishes, and I'm going to lead the charge here with legislator scorecards. A sister organization of Educational Freedom Institute is called the Alliance for Education Freedom, AEF, and I have been pushing out scorecards for legislators around the country, and the scorecards dig down very deeply into every single vote. Not committee votes, because those can be messed with. Like, you hear this sometimes in hearings you've seen as you've watched legislators. They'll say, I will vote aye for the sake of conversation. And so they're not voting in favor of the bill. They want to give it a fair hearing. And so we don't count those votes. But what we do count is the sponsorship of the bill very heavily. That's weighted really heavily. And then a floor vote. And so it's been interesting as I've been reviewing how specific legislators that I know are voting on different bills. It's been even more interesting maybe to look at how the members of education committees in majority Republican states vote on these bills. And these are states. So for anyone that doesn't know, the Speaker of the House on the House side and the Senate President on the Senate side selects the members of the committees in the legislature. They assign them to certain committees. And they could do it for any number of reasons. They might select somebody, but I'll just pull up Ohio here and give you a feel for what this looks like. So in Ohio, the House Education Committee, and again, we scored every single bill for the last 3 years that had to do with education, on whether it expands education freedom, on whether it does nothing, it's neutral for freedom, or if it restricts it. And the chair of the House Education Committee currently is Sarah Fowler Arthur. I don't know Representative Arthur, but she got an A. So that's pretty good. Adam Byrd got an A+. These are all Republicans. Gail Manning got a D+. And the vice chair of the Ohio House Education Committee, who is appointed, again, by the Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, got a D+, Representative Odioso. So this has been an interesting process to go through to see exactly what this looks like. I'll give you another example here. This is Arizona's Senate, and the Senate Ed Chair, Senator Angus, got an A. Corinne Werner got a B. J.D. Mesnard got an A, and Senator Dunn got a B. I don't expect much out of the Democrats, so I'm not going to talk about their D+, but but it's just been interesting to note how, it's obvious, it's apparent that these people are not being appointed because they align particularly well with a very important plank on the Republican Party platform. That's not why they were appointed, obviously. they were appointed for other reasons. And I won't
look. It's often the case, and this is a problem in a bunch of different issue areas in both parties and across the country. And I'm speaking as a former state legislator myself. That somebody who has a certain issue area because they were in that industry get themselves appointed to a certain committee.
Yes,
and they're essentially already captured, right? So people who worked in the healthcare industry tend to find themselves onto the health committee. People who were either in business or who were on the labor, so who were like in a union, find themselves on the commerce committee, on the labor committee. And we see this, the education committee. Even Republicans often are people who were former superintendents or things like that. They'll go to legislative leadership. They say, hey, I've got seniority. I've been here for 4 terms. I have a background as a superintendent. I want to be on the ed committee. And they say, sure. And so that's how these committees essentially get captured by the very industries that they are supposed to be overseeing.
100%. And like you said, and that's the point I was just going to make, this isn't just for education. It could, like you said, I'm a healthcare exec, or I was, or I'm a doctor, and so I should be on, and fair enough, you have a lot of experience there. But if your politics don't align particularly well with the plank of a plank in the platform, should we be appointing you? So anyway, it's been a fun little exercise. I've had the opportunity now to hand out some awards to some people that here in Arizona, in Utah. We've got some others coming up North and South Carolina that'll be fun to go out and recognize people. And they really appreciate the recognition. It's not something that they get very often for education freedom anyway. Awards are given to legislators for all kinds of things, but they've been really appreciative, and it's been fun to do. And I think that the recognizing the good hopefully will encourage them to continue to do that. And on the flip side, maybe the D pluses in the Republican Party will start to get a little more scrutiny.
Well, I actually think this is an important exercise because it is pretty fashionable to rank states along certain policy dimensions, but there's a danger there in terms of producing a bystander effect for the people who are actually in charge of crafting policy in those states, where they can say, well, yeah, I mean, it's a problem, but it's not my problem. I'm trying to fix it.
Right.
It's their fault.
That's right. Right. It's their fault. So, here's a way actually of holding feet to the fire and actually trying to animate people towards, going in the right direction. I guess one question or concern I have is that you say the methodology is, they get points for any sort of bill that advances educational freedom. It's a hypothetical. Isn't it possible someone's voting no on a piece of legislation that does advance educational freedom, but they're voting no because it doesn't go far enough for them?
Yes. And that's a good point. So I had a legislator reach out to me when they saw their score because they weren't happy with their score. And so they walked me through, look, what was it that dragged down my score? And so I told them, this is, you introduced this bill and this bill, and they both did bad thing. They both were bad. One, just a quick reference, was that it eliminated the instructional time model in Arizona. And it's something that went into effect during COVID. And I said, that's a bad bill. It reduces flexibility. And so we had a conversation, and through that, I didn't change my position on the scorecard for that bill, but the legislator was able to add a little more color and commentary around other decisions that they had made, that then we did adjust and said, okay, that makes sense. I understand why you voted in that way. And, for instance, it happens not infrequently that someone will file a bait bill, right? We want to bait the opponents to this position to show themselves, to expose themselves for the bad policy that they advocate for. And I don't want that kind of thing to go against them on a scorecard. And so those are conversations that we have. So it's a great point, Ian, and those have to be worked through.
Well, the nice thing about scorecards like this is that they increase transparency by bringing information that often is held only by a small circle of people in the legislative world and the policy world more generally to the broader public. And that is a way essentially of imposing political accountability on lawmakers. And that brings us to our second topic, which is spilling the tea on AFC. It's also important to bring information into the public domain to hold certain organizations accountable. And so AFC, the American Federation for Children, has been one of, I would say, the top 3 school choice organizations in the country, alongside EdChoice and Excel and Ed, for a long time. But for a long time, people in the movement have recognized that they are not great team players. They do not play well with others. Whereas Excel and Ed and EdChoice tend to go into states, these are all national organizations. They all go into states and try to advance school choice legislation, but the other groups work with local organizations on the ground. So for example, here in Arizona, we have a fantastic school choice coalition. We've got the Goldwater Institute, the Center for Arizona Policy, the Catholic Diocese, the Christian Schools Association, Heritage and Heritage Action are on the ground here, the Education Freedom Institute. I'm sure there's a few more that I'm missing. Love Your School, of course. So this is a school choice coalition that meets on a regular basis. Anytime you have a large coalition like this, there's bound to be some amount of disagreement. But this is an organization, we've had school choice here in Arizona for 3 decades. This is a school choice coalition that works really well together, hammers out differences privately, and then comes to some sort of a compromise when there's disagreement and goes forward sort of together. The thing about AFC is they tend to go into states, ignore the school choice coalition, do their own thing, even when the thing they're doing doesn't seem to make much sense, which brings us to the present moment. The opponents of school choice, particular the Teachers Union, the AEA, and a group called SOS, Save Our Schools Arizona, are trying to pare back the Education Savings Account program in Arizona. Arizona was the first state to adopt ESAs, which are a way that families can spend state dollars on tutoring, textbooks, homeschool curricula, online learning, special needs therapy, private school tuition, and more. So you have the freedom and flexibility to customize your child's education. Arizona was the first state to do it, the first state to go universal. There's more than 102,000 students who are currently participating. And this is sort of the beginning of the sea change around the country, moving from the sort of what you might call the factory model of education to a much more customized, student-centered model of education. And the unions, of course, are invested in the status quo and they want to stop it. And so the way they're trying to stop it in Arizona is they're trying to do what's called a ballot initiative. Get enough signatures to put a petition on the ballot that is going to scale back the program. It's going to add a whole bunch of regulations, limiting how families can use their ESA. It's going to limit who is eligible, only up to $150,000. Right now, everybody in the state is eligible, just like for a public school. This would limit it only to $150,000, which is the median income of a firefighter married to a nurse, right? So we're not talking about super wealthy people here. So obviously the school choice movement is opposed to this ballot initiative and are doing a whole bunch of things, as we did successfully a few years ago, running a decline to sign campaign to prevent them from getting enough signatures. This worked in 2020. We expect that it could work again this year. But AFC decided to go a different direction without even consulting anybody in the local school choice organization. Even after the local school choice organization had gone to them and said, hey, if you're going to do anything in the state, we'd really appreciate if you worked with us. The American Federation for Children decided we're going to do our own thing. They launched their own ballot initiative in Arizona, which does a lot of the same things as the SOS petition, curtailing the way that families can use their ESA. And worse, they've even added more regulations that weren't in the SOS petition. Now, the one thing they don't do is they keep it universal, so they don't limit it in terms of income, but they add a testing mandate. Now, I'm not 100% opposed to what are called nationally norm reference tests. I'm against the state test. I'm against having one single test, but a menu of tests I'm not so opposed to. But here in Arizona, the School Choice Coalition for 3+ decades has decided that the tests are unnecessary. The schools don't want them. The homeschoolers especially don't want them. Most of them are doing it on their own. They just don't want the state to mandate this kind of thing. AFC comes in and mandates it. And worse, the AFC says the reason we're doing this is because we need to protect the program and there's just too much fraud in the program. Now, regular listeners to this show know, actually, the fraud rate in Arizona is minuscule. Okay, yep. The Arizona Department of Education showed, using a randomized audit, that misspending or spending on unallowed items is less than 2%, way better than pretty much any other program. And actually, in the vast majority of the misspending was on small, innocent things: backpacks, lunch boxes, water bottles. Okay, and when that happens, the parent gets a notification, hey, you actually can't spend on this. Oops, sorry. The money goes back in, they have to put the money back into the account, right? This is not a big deal. The actual fraud, or what they call egregious spending, was 0.3%. So a tiny, minuscule amount of fraud. That being said, there are 4 ways to pay with an ESA. You can do what's called marketplace, direct pay, the debit card, or reimbursement. Almost all of the fraudulent activity was in marketplace. What does the AFC petition do? It gets rid of debit cards, reimbursements, and direct pay, and only keeps marketplace, which is the very area. Okay, so it makes no sense policy-wise. They didn't work with the local school choice coalition, and lots of ESA parents are very upset by this. There are a lot of ESA parents who are upset that there's more regulations like testing. There are a lot of ESA parents who are expressing frustration. They say, hey, we use debit cards all the time. It lets us buy stuff immediately. We love the reimbursement model, right? We actually prefer using these things in marketplace. Marketplace is more difficult. It's more expensive. Sometimes you have to wait. They're getting what they call a revenue share. In other words, a Class Wallet, the organization that manages it, takes a percentage of every payment, right? It's more expensive to go that way than it is to do a reimbursement or whatnot. And they're trying to shuffle them all into this one system. So it doesn't make any sense politically. It doesn't make any sense in terms of policy. And again, they have gone behind the school choice coalition locally and nationally, because all the other national school choice coalitions.
So a quick note here too, Jason, the signature gatherers for the ballot initiative that is backed by the NEA, the AEA, and what's you mentioned earlier, Arizona Save Our Schools, are also gathering signatures for this AFC initiative.
Yeah.
They're carrying signature sheets for both ballot initiatives.
So I haven't seen that. To be clear,
have seen it. I've seen video.
I've seen video where there are 2 people standing side by side, one for SOS and one for AFC, and they're encouraging the voters to vote for to sign both. Okay, because these are paid signature gatherers. They're not ideological often. They're just trying to meet their quotas, and they're standing with each other in the sun for hours. They're making friends and they're trying to help each other out, right? So, I mean, AFC, one of the things they pitched this as was, oh, this is going to increase the cost of signature gathering for our opponents and make it harder. But then they're standing there out there and they're saying, hey, yeah, sign this one and sign that one. Ours are a little different. I've even seen ones where they're like, yeah, it's basically the same thing except for the income cap, but here you can sign both. And there's a lot of misinformation here. I'm gonna share my screen. We're gonna try this live. We'll see if I can actually get this to work. All right, it's not gonna work. Don't worry about it. The video I wanted to show was actually of somebody approaches the AFC booth and says, hey, what's this all about? And they said, oh, sign this petition. It's to expand the ESA. Now, there is nothing in their petition. It's already universal. There's nothing, not only is there nothing in their petition that expands the ESA, it curtails the ESA, as we said, in a whole bunch of ways. And it gets rid of your ability to spend on supplementary materials, right? Makes it so there are things that you're no longer going to be allowed to spend on. You're no longer going to be able to pay the way you've been paying before. And some schools may say, hey, we don't want to have anything to do. Once you start adding regulations, we don't want to see more regulations added. We're out. So it does a lot to actually curtail the program, nothing to expand it. But here are paid people working on behalf of the American Federation for Children, lying to voters, telling them this is going to expand school choice, sign here, when it does exactly the opposite.
So, Jason, if we approach this from a position of charity, my thinking would be this is probably not an organization that's opposed to school choice. This is an organization that has engaged in some sort of miscalculation. And I guess, first of all, I'm curious whether you believe that's true. And then second of all, if it is, what is that miscalculation? How did we arrive here?
Okay, so I do believe that is true. I do believe that. I don't think they are an anti-school choice organization. I think that they are much more comfortable with regulation than the median parent, the median school, and the median school choice advocates. And that's why they're working outside the coalition. I will say it's also personally frustrating that literally a week before they launched this, we had a private meeting with a bunch of national school choice organizations, a regularly scheduled meeting, in which AFC solicited information from everybody else, but didn't tell us what they were doing. And this is a pattern. They keep doing this sort of thing. They hold these meetings to gather information about what every other organization is doing. They don't tell us. We find out after they've already done it. And so again, they have betrayed the other school choice organizations. They've stabbed us in the back, and they should not be a part of any school choice organization, nationally or locally. Okay, that being said, I think essentially they have a misguided theory of political sustainability. Okay, their theory of political sustainability is no bad headlines. So if we can really regulate the program, really tighten it up, get it down to 0% fraud, not just 0.3, but actually 0, then we won't have any more bad headlines. And that's good for the legislators that they're supporting, to support school choice. Okay, why is that a misguided theory? Number one, you'll never get 0%, okay? The other side will manufacture headlines. They've been manufacturing headlines saying there's 20% fraud when there's actually 0.3% fraud, right? So they're just going to the other side hates school choice. They're going to manufacture a headline. And even if some, genie waved a magic wand and said, from here on out, there are no bad headlines, they're going to draw from bad headlines that they've produced in years past. There's no getting rid of the bad headlines. If you're going to do something that is actually going to make a change, you are going to generate opposition and you're going to have bad headlines. So you got to learn to suck it up and deal with it. The other thing is this: what is the real political sustainability? Real political sustainability comes when you have a whole bunch of people who are invested in this program. So in other words, lots of ESA families, and you want them to be very happy, highly satisfied customers. What do these regulations do that are meant to tamp down on fraud and stuff like that? Well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, try to eliminate fraud. We absolutely, to the extent possible, we should be trying to eliminate fraud. And we should say this is a very, very accountable program. It could be even more accountable while balancing usability, okay? But the things they're trying to do dramatically decrease usability, and it's going to drive down the number of people who are in the program, and it's going to drive down the satisfaction of the people who are using the program, right? So if I'm right that more people in the program who are very satisfied is the way you have political sustainability, what they're doing is actually undermining the political sustainability of the program in the very pursuit of that thing. So I think it is a misguided strategy. And if they had consulted actually with any of us on the ground first, maybe they would have understood that. As a matter of fact, I know that there was one organization that found out what they were doing, asked them about it. They got to see the proposal. This local organization in Arizona provided them, said, don't do it, but if you are going to do it, here are 6 or 7 things we'd like to see you change. And they didn't listen to anything that they said. So they've got their way of doing business. And to the point, at the beginning, we have tried to deal with this behind the scenes like gentlemen for years. This isn't the first time they've done something like this. So this has been a problem, not just in Arizona, but in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, in New Hampshire, and a bunch of other states. We have tried to handle this behind the scenes like gentlemen, But at a certain point, if they are going to take public actions against the rest of the school choice coalition, the school choice coalition has to call them out publicly.
Well, if the youngins on our, among our listeners will believe this, there used to be a day when Snape from Harry Potter was white. And when he said something to the effect of, it takes a great deal of courage to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends.
Yeah.
So
I think that was Albus Dumbledore, but I'm not going to.
Was it?
It's
I'm actually not a Harry Potter fan, if you can't tell.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say that, a couple of decades ago, I was a part of the inaugural state team of what the organization that became the American Federation for Children. I know multiple members of their board and their staff are good people that support school choice and do good work and who I deeply respect. Having said all that, I 100% agree with everything that Jason has just said. Probably the worst thing of all of this is the opportunity cost of this effort. The public document release has said that they've spent $1.3 million on this ballot signature thing. The supporters of this seem confused about what it is they're doing because they have different stories. Some of them seem to think they're actually going to get the signatures and pass this thing and live happily ever after. Others of them would like us to believe that this was some sort of 4D chess Sun Tzu super maneuver to stop the other side from getting their signatures. Either way, I don't think either one of those two things is going to happen. And I know that the $1.3 million that has been spent on this could have been much better spent on, for instance, challenging the validity of the signatures of the other side once they turn them in, trying to stop them from getting their signatures, which Jason mentioned was successfully done on a shoestring in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
The signatures required were much lower than they are now. They're a lot higher now. The problem is that the NEA is spending money on paid signature gatherers this time. So that effort may or may not ultimately prevail. And then there's also legal challenges, right? The Arizona Supreme Court has thrown things off the ballot in recent years that were unconstitutional. I'm pretty sure that what SOS is doing is unconstitutional. I have my own theories about that. So in any case, it is impossible to conclude that this $1.3 million is being wisely spent. And everything procedural about what Jason just said is true. Some groups have productive practices and cooperating with local coalitions, and unfortunately some national groups don't. And right now, the American Federation for Children clearly does not.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the problem here, obviously, and I'm going to do my best transition, Jason Bedrick transition here.
I had one lined up if you were.
You go.
Well, I was going to say, so clearly this is we got very limited time, so we want to turn to Matt Ladner. Clearly this is a waste of money, but they're not the only organization wasting money. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in school construction. So, Matt, if you want to tell us a little bit what's going on in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Nice transition, Jason. Okay, so Matt, did you get? Yep, there we go. All right, so I have a sad tale of woe to tell you. And earlier we were talking about the regulatory capture of legislative committees. There's also regulatory capture of school districts, right? This is really the uber problem that we have, is that school district democracy is rigged. And low turnout elections, nobody knows the names of their school board, how many members there are, what policies they support. And usually in this regulatory capture process, we focus on the education units for a good reason. But it's not just them. It's also major contractors, okay, including people who build school buildings. And I think we've discussed on this podcast before the situation where we see states like Arizona where there's just more and more school buildings being built, even though school district enrollment is in decline. Well, if you look at this slide down there on the bottom, it's the sad tale of Pima Elementary. This is an elementary school in Scottsdale Unified School District. And there was an over $250 million bond done back in the teens in Scottsdale. And they took on this debt despite the fact that at the time, the district was probably at about 60% of their building capacity. Okay. So Scottsdale Unified, I'm sure everyone knows Scottsdale. It's, a leafy suburb in the Phoenix area. Scottsdale Unified is built for about 38,000 students and currently enrolls about 20,000 students. Okay. So anyway, a part of what happened with this bond is that they took a number of schools, tore them down to the ground, and completely rebuilt them, including Pima Elementary there. And if you squint at your iPhone, you'll see the cost of the rebuild was $20.4 billion. And that finished up in 2019. This year, Scottsdale Unified announced that they were closing Pima Elementary. Okay. The school was built at a capacity of 850 students. It opened way below 850 students and just kind of kept going down from there. Now, of course, we've got a big effort in our state to scapegoat the ESA program. But in a Daily Signal piece I wrote about this school closure, if you net out all the school choice stuff going on in Scottsdale, which we have an open enrollment report from the Arizona Department of Education, and we also know how many ESA students there are. Okay. Scottsdale Unified is actually a net beneficiary of open enrollment. They get more kids from other districts than they give up. If somebody were to do a Thanos snap and you make charter schools, open enrollment, and the ESA program go away, right? And you disrupt the education of thousands and thousands of students and force them to go to schools that are not their preferred school. Okay. The net impact on Scottsdale Unified's enrollment would be actually quite modest. The impact on Pima Elementary would have been vanishingly small. Okay. The problem here is that, first of all, districts are, this is a good, the three columns on the second to right is Scottsdale Unified. You can see kind of how that nets out. So, the problem is, you might ask, like, why is a school district like with 60% capacity, taking on $250 million of debt to rebuild schools, right? I had people that were close observers of the district's politics at the time predict to me that several of these new schools would close in a few years. And Pima Elementary is the first one. It may not be the last one. Okay. The big thing going on, of course, is the baby bust. It started in 2008. The Scottsdale Unified School District actually pays a group of economists to do a demographic report for them every single year. Nothing about this could have been the least bit surprising to anyone paying attention. Okay. So what's going on? Well, part of the reason that school districts continue to build space, even though their enrollment is down, is because they can. Okay. If the last student leaves Scottsdale Unified, the Scottsdale Unified taxpayers are still on the hook. They are still going to be paying the bond on Pima Elementary, for instance, for decades to come, even though it's sitting there vacant. So we've got a situation where builders are getting about 50% more per square foot construction for district schools than they are for charter schools in the state. This is highly profitable. We had an NPR report back in 2017 that demonstrated that Maricopa County bond elections, including the Scottsdale election, by the way, were solely financed by architectural and building firms. They were the only donors. Okay.
That's
so
right.
what we have here is crony capitalism just run amok. Okay. Anytime anyone wants to wrap them, Diane Ravitch loves to do this, right? She occasionally will wrap herself in the flag of democracy as if she's Pericles giving the funeral oration or whatever, right? Oh, well, these schools are democratic and accountable. School district democracy is rigged, folks. It is rigged, and it is rigged in favor of its major shareholders, and those include unionized employee interests, but also major contractors. And so we haven't figured out what to do about this here in Arizona yet. We have got a huge problem on our hands because districts have started closing schools, but they don't do anything with them. They don't sell them. They don't lease them. There's like
because the people who are most interested in purchasing them or using them are their competition, and they don't want the competition to have it. So they would rather put the taxpayer on the hook for big empty buildings, and not give their opponents or rivals any space to
refuse.
teach kids.
I think
not about kids.
I think a part of the solution is going to be that we need to pass a more robust form of co-location from New York City. That we as so district employees tend to look at school buildings as their personal possessions, right? Like when you try to talk to this, Matt and I both have had this experience personally, right? You start to talk about this as a problem and the reaction is like, no, my precious, right? But they are not the possessions of the people working in the school districts. Those buildings were paid for by taxpayers, and they were built for a purpose, and that purpose was to educate students. And vacant and underutilized buildings are literally taking resources out of the classroom. Okay.
Yep.
So I think it's time for us to develop like super co-location, not just to allow charter schools to operate in these schools, but why not private schools as well, right? Because if you look at, what the kind of schools that parents actually want, they want more charter schools, but they want a lot more private schools, right? And we literally have resources just going to waste on this.
Rent it out. You could even rent it out to homeschoolers. You could have, you could have a science lab that homeschoolers could come and rent out, on a weekly or monthly basis or what have you.
You could have 10 micro schools in a district school.
Well, we've offered a very big lunch today. We're 7 minutes over time, so we should probably wrap it up. But thank you all for the excellent lunch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.